on this strange paradox, decided only to be undecided, resolved to be irresolute, examined for drift, solid for fluidity, all-powerful to be impotent. So today, we must dump another 70 million tons of global warming pollution into the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet, as if it were to open sober. And tomorrow, we will dump a slightly larger amount with a cumulative concentration now trapping more and more heat from the sun. As a result, the Earth has a fever, and the fever is rising. The experts have told us it is not a passing infliction that will heal by itself. We ask for a second opinion, and a third, and a fourth. And the consistent conclusion, stated with increasing alarm, is that something basic is wrong. We are what is wrong, and we must make it right. 7 years from now, in the last few months, it has been harder and harder to misinterpret the signs that our world is spinning out of kilter. Major cities in North and South America, Asia, and Australia are nearly out of water due to massive droughts and melting glaciers. The fires have forced 500,000 people from their homes in one country and caused a national emergency that almost brought down the government in another. Climate refugees have migrated into areas already inhabited by people with different cultures, religions, and traditions, increasingly the potential for conflict. Stronger storms in the Pacific and Atlantic have threatened whole cities. Millions have been displaced by massive flooding in South Asia, Mexico, and 18 countries in Africa. As temperature extremes have increased, tens of thousands have lost their lives. We are recklessly burning and clearing our forests and driving more and more species into extinction. The very web of life on which we depend is being ripped and frayed. 70 years later, my teacher, Roger Reville, and his colleague, Dave Keeling, began to precisely document the increasing C02 levels day by day. But unlike most other forms of pollution, C02 is invisible, tasteless, and odorless, which has helped keep the truth about what it's doing to the climate outside and out of mind. The catastrophe now threatening us is unprecedented, and we often confuse the unprecedented with the improbable. We also find it hard to imagine making the massive changes that are now necessary to solve the crisis. And when large truths are genuinely inconvenient, whole societies can, at least for a time, ignore them. Yet, as George Orwell reminds us, sooner or later a false belief bumps us up against solid reality, usually on the battlefield. In the years since the prize was first awarded, the entire relationship between humankind and the Earth has been radically transformed, and still we have remained largely oblivious to the impact of our cumulative action. Indeed, without realizing it, we have begun to wage war on the Earth itself. Now, we the Earth's climate are locked in a relationship familiar to the war of planners, mutually assured destruction. More than 2 decades ago, scientists calculated that nuclear war could throw so much debris and smoke into the air that it would block life-giving sunlight from our atmosphere, causing a nuclear winter. Their eloquent warning here is also helped galvanize the world's resolve to halt the nuclear arms race. Now, science is warning us that if we do not quickly reduce the global warming pollution that is trapping so much of the heat of our planet, normally retreats back out of the atmosphere, we are in danger of creating a permanent carbon summer. As the American poet Robert Frost wrote, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. Either, he notes, would suffice, but neither needs be our fate. It is time to make our peace with the planet. We must quickly mobilize our civilization with the urgency and resolve that has previously have been only when nations mobilized for war. These prior struggles for survival were won when leaders found words at the 11th hour that released a mighty surge of courage, hope, readiness to sacrifice for a protracted and mortal challenge. Now,